The United States has a disastrous history of military intervention and regime change around the world, which has brought suffering to millions of people, it's bankrupted our country, dishonored our troops, and it's undermined our national security. We must end this policy now before we get into yet another military conflict, this time in Venezuela. Now, President Trump and his administration have already instituted heavy sanctions on Venezuela. They've doubled down on their position that all options are on the table. I wholeheartedly support the Venezuelan people as they fight for a free and fair democracy. But the United States should not be in the business of intervening, of picking who should lead their country, and we certainly should not be threatening military action. Venezuela poses no threat to the United States. Congress has not authorized the United States to go to war in Venezuela, and there's no justification for our country to violate the sovereignty of the Venezuelan people. Now, the reality is that threats of U.S. military action and regime change in Venezuela is undermining ongoing efforts to convince North Korea to give up their nuclear weapons program, which exists because Kim Jong-un sees it as the only deterrent against U.S.-led regime change. Now, President Trump is promising North Korea we will not wage regime change war against them, but at the same time is simultaneously threatening regime change in Venezuela. North Korea is going to look at President Trump's actions, not at empty promises. The United States needs to stay out of Venezuela and let the Venezuelan people determine their own future.
Why so few lawmakers have spoken out against their own government's intervention in Venezuela?
Well, we've seen a massive hysteria in this country since the election of Donald Trump about so-called Russian meddling, none of which has been proven. But in this case of blatant, open, even celebrated meddling, and I think meddling is a soft euphemism for what is, clearly just an aggressive coup d'etat in Venezuela, an attempted coup d'etat. None of these representatives were really willing to admit it. They didn't want to talk about it. They don't even consider what the Trump administration is doing in Venezuela as a form of interference. And it not only does it show the hypocrisy, it shows the arrogance, the imperial arrogance that is bipartisan. All of the Republican Party and all of the Democratic Party, except for a couple of people, including Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who is now speaking out against this coup d'etat. And we see similar language coming from Ro Khanna in California, another congressman, and the Democratic Party presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard, who is also speaking out. So it's almost bipartisan consensus, except for a few people in the Democratic Party who are speaking out against this. And I think that's what Max exposed.
Any comment on the situation in Venezuela?
Yeah, we're working on our
Any comment on the situation in Venezuela?
Yeah, we're working on our